This week's Torah portion is the Torah portion called Toldos or Toldot, and we're still in the book of Genesis. Last week, at the end of Parshat Sarah, which we spoke about last week, we learned of the marriage of Isaac, who is the child of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac to Rebekah. And this week's Torah portion picks up in their marriage, where they, as his parents, as Isaac's parents, Abraham and Sarah, were also find it very difficult to have children, so too Isaac and Rivka struggle with barrenness, with infertility. They're unable to have children, and for 20 years they struggle. And in this week's Torah portion, we read about the prayers of our forefather and our foremother, the prayers of Isaac and Rebekah, asking God, entreating God to give them a child. And I've read some very interesting commentaries on this, and one of them is that Isaac prayed that his holy wife Rivka should bear children, that the promise that was given to Abraham, that he would be a great nation, that we'd inherit a land, etc., etc., that the covenant that was made with Abraham would go through Isaac and Jacob, but it would also be through Rebekah. And Isaac is praying that Rebekah should be the one to bear his children. He's praying for her. And we also learned that Rebekah, when she's praying for God, she's praying for her husband Isaac, that he should have children. So what we learn here, what we see here is these holy forefather and foremothers of ours praying for the other one, not praying for themselves, please can I have a child, but please can my holy spouse have a child. Please God, change the decree, make the decree happen, give my spouse a child. And from this we learn the importance of our prayers when we pray for other people. And in this example we have the high bar to live up to, which is praying without any self-interest. Obviously, Rebekah wanted to have a child. Obviously, Isaac wanted to have a child. But their focus when they entreated God, when they spoke with God and wanted God to bring a child into the world, they were praying for their spouse. And perhaps that's the paradigm. When we have something that we want to pray for, we're told that you should also pray for other people. You should pray for somebody with the same health condition as you. You should pray for someone who's also struggling in the same way you are, because you understand what it's like to have that condition, or to have that trouble, or to have that strife, or to have that illness, or whatever it is that you experience, that it gives you an ability to understand on some level what the other person who has that same condition is experiencing. So when you pray for them, hopefully without any vested interest, if we can get to that place, that what we're doing is we're praying that that person should be blessed with healing, or with children, or with livelihood and money, or whatever it is that we're praying for other people, that it creates greater blessing in the world, is what we're learning from this. So here in the beginning of this week's Torah portion, we're learning the great importance of praying for other people. And we learn that through Rebekah praying for Isaac to have children, and we learn, and at the same time, Isaac is praying that Rebekah will be the one through whom the promise will continue of land and great destiny. So that's the first thing I wanted to bring out, was the idea of prayer and praying for other people. Rebekah conceives. She is now carrying a baby. She doesn't know that it's twins. She's carrying twins, and she experiences great pain. She experiences these twins. She doesn't know it's twins in utero, who are struggling with each other, and she doesn't understand what's happening. And she goes to God and she inquires of God, what's happening, what's going on, and God tells her that she's carrying twins, and that the older will serve the younger. The older will serve the younger. So she has a prophecy. She understands what's going to play out in the lives of these twins that are going to be born, that the older will serve the younger. The first child to be born is Esau, Asaph, and he's born very hairy, and he's born with a red complexion, and he is named Esau, is Asui, like he's complete, like he's a complete human being. It's almost like fully formed. And next to come is Jacob, Yaakov, and he's apparently holding on to the heel of the firstborn Asaph that's coming out. So he's named Yaakov, heel. He's holding on to the heel. And Yaakov, Jacob, our forefather, is smooth-skinned, and as they grow up together, they grow up in the same home, they grow up with the same schooling. There's a lot that's the same about their upbringing. And as they get to be older and older, it becomes more apparent what their natures are. And it was something that Rebekah was experiencing in utero. She was experiencing this battle between these twins, which plays out in their in their lives on this on in this world. That Esau is a hunter. He's an outdoors man. He's a man of the field. It says that he's a man of the field, and he's very rugged, and he's very strong, and he's very materialistic. He's very here and now. And Jacob, on the other hand, is a man who sits in the tent. He's learning. He's seeking spirituality, and he's learning all the time. He's not a man of physicality. He's not a man of the material world. He's a man of spirituality. He's growing. He's searching. He's named Yaakov because he's a man that wants to grow. He wants to learn. He wants to understand. He wants to, take himself into the spiritual realm. And so what we have here is two cosmic forces epitomized by these two children, these two boys, Esau and Yaakov, Jacob and Esau. And ideally, we all have inherent strengths and gifts and talents that we are born with, and the challenge is to use those character traits for the good, like to take our strengths, to take those things that we're born with, that we're inherently good at, and channel them in the right way. And as we know, it plays out in such a way that Esau is a man that's very deceives his father, and he's really not a good guy. And Jacob is a man who's learning and wants to understand and wants to know. And it says that Rebecca loved Jacob, and Isaac loved Esau. So here we see already, something perhaps that we know and we look at and we say, you shouldn't favor one child over another. You should treat all children that they think that they're the favorite, that they feel completely loved by their parents. There should be a sense of favoritism. And we also know that Rebecca doesn't tell Isaac the prophecy that she has, that the older will serve the younger. She doesn't tell Isaac this prophecy that she has. And Rabbi Sachs in this week's Torah portion speaks about the lack of communication that happened between Rebecca and Isaac, that they favored different children, that they didn't communicate. She didn't communicate with him, to Isaac, the prophecy that she had. And as we know, as the story unfolds, that she pushes Jacob to deceive Isaac to get the blessing. But that's later on this week's Torah portion. But this idea of communication and the importance of communication, and how important it is for us to use our words for good and to develop relationships with each other by speaking things out that shouldn't be hidden. And perhaps this was something that Rebecca should have spoken to Isaac about, or that as parents they should have they could have been more loving towards both children. Not that it was known that one was favored over the other, but that's just something to put out there as something to look at when we look at our patriarchs and our matriarchs, and we say what amazing people, what holy people they are, and what they did in the world. And maybe this is also something we can learn from them. Okay, so we learned that Isaac, he went to the same places that Abraham, his father, went to dig the wells that his father had already dug. So Abraham, in a time of famine, had gone to a place called Gerar, and he had dug wells, which is a metaphor, perhaps also literal, but perhaps also a metaphor for him digging and seeking out the water, which is the source of life. What's the source of life? Contact with God. So at the same time as we see it literally, that he's digging wells and feeding the people water so that they can be quenched of their thirst, we're also understanding this metaphorically, that Abraham is revealing to them God in the world, that there's a hiddenness of God in the world, and that the digging of the wells and revealing the water and bringing the water out is also a metaphor for understanding that Abraham is teaching people, all people that come in his way. He's teaching them about God. He's revealing God to them in the world. He's quenching their thirst for spirituality by digging the wells. The Philistines, the Plishtim who live there, fill them in. And now Isaac, who is the child of Abraham, comes to these same wells and he redigs the wells. What's that about? That's about taking the lesson of his father Abraham and saying, and owning it for himself. And I'm going to redig these same wells. I'm going to bring that water out. I'm also, Isaac, the son of Abraham, going to reveal God in the world. And I think when we think about that in our lives, it is for us also for us to reveal the hiddenness of God, for us to reveal that in the world, for us to say, yes, there's a God, not be embarrassed to talk about God, and to say, to point out where our lives have been affected by God, to be grateful for God, etc., etc., that this is something that is handed down to us as we look at our matriarchs and patriarchs. So when Isaac redigs the wells that his father dug and were filled in, now he's redigging them, he's revealing God in the world, and that is also our mission. And the last thing I want to say in this week's Torah portion, because there's not much time, is that at the end of this week's Torah portion, Isaac feels that he's about to die. He's coming to the end of his life, and he wants to give a blessing to his children. He wants to give a blessing first to his firstborn son Esau. So he calls his son Esau in, and he says, I'm getting old and my eyes are dimmed, and go out and get some food for me and come back and I will bless you. And it says that Isaac is 123 years old. And we know from last week's Torah portion, when we read about the life of his mother Sarah, that Sarah died when she was 127. So from this, we understand the psychological reality, which I believe is true, that when we get very close, within 5 years of the age that our parent died at, that we start to face our own mortality, that our own mortality becomes that much more front and center when we get close to the age that our parent died. So Isaac is 123, and his mother died when she was 127, and so now he's beginning to see, that's when my mother died. That sort of, on some level, feels like a cap. It feels like this is an opportunity for me to realize that my life is not going to last forever, and I have to seize the moment. I have to give the blessings to my children. I have to, again, live that life fully and understand why I'm here and what I'm here to do. And I think to wrap it all up, if you go back to the beginning where we talked about prayer, the prayer of Isaac and Rebekah, where they're praying for each other to be able to conceive, that they prayed for each other. There's a going to God and entreating God and imploring God to give the other spouse a child. There's the communication between Rivkah and Isaac, that perhaps there could have been more communication between them that would have helped ameliorate some of the situations that occurred later on. We have the digging of the wells and bringing out godliness in the world, that this hiddenness of God is metaphorically described as digging wells. So we're revealing the water, we're revealing godliness in the world and bringing that out into the open. And that's our mission also, is to reveal God in the world. And then we have this idea of mortality when we get within a few years, 5 years of the death of our youngest parent, that we start to evaluate our own lives and why am I here? What am I here for? And when we look back at the lives of Isaac and Rebekah, which is what this week's Torah portion is coming on some level, one of the things it's coming to teach us is to understand that this life of ours doesn't last forever, and we have to seize it, and we have to work towards bringing spirituality out into the world. We are the descendants of Jacob, who was a seeker, who was a searcher, who was trying to bring spirituality out, bringing the physicality up and making it more spiritual, as opposed to Esau, who was a man of the field, who was completely in his own mind developed and didn't need to keep growing, didn't need to keep working on himself. He was done, didn't believe in the next world, didn't believe that there was more to this world than this world. And so we're the descendants of Jacob, and that's our mission. Our mission is to bring God out into the world, to recognize that this is a journey that we're on, and that we have important work to do to bring godliness out into the world.